At the dawn of the 20th century, the Mississippi River was both a lifeline and a looming threat for the American South, for decades the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had pursued a single-minded strategy, the levees-only policy. Engineers believed that by building ever higher earthen walls along the riverbanks, the river could be contained and its floods controlled. The theory seemed simple. By confining the river, its current would accelerate, deepen the riverbed, and remain within its artificial channel. Officials assured Congress and the public that these levees could withstand virtually any storm the Mississippi could deliver. This confidence transformed the river's floodplain. Millions of acres of fertile land were cleared for cotton, towns and plantations expanded, and entire communities were built under the assumption that the levees provided complete protection. The river was seen as a tamed giant, a conduit for commerce and growth, a domestic superhighway for shipping and transport. Yet with each new foot of earth added to the levees, the river was slowly being forced higher than the surrounding landscape. By the mid-1920s, the river's energy was contained unnaturally, coiled like a spring, waiting for a moment of catastrophic release. Unbeknownst to those living along its banks, the Mississippi had been storing enormous potential energy. The human attempt to dominate nature created a fragile illusion of safety. Behind the walls of soil, the river's power remained unchecked, ready to turn against the very communities it had sustained for generations. The stage was set for one of the largest and most devastating floods in United States history, a flood that would reshape the land, the economy, and the lives of hundreds of thousands. The disaster did not arrive suddenly. It began as a slow, relentless buildup of water. Starting in the summer of 1926, the central Mississippi River Basin experienced continuous heavy rainfall that saturated the soil. Streams and tributaries swelled, unable to absorb the immense volumes of water pouring from the upper watershed. By the fall, states as far upstream as Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa were seeing record water levels in their rivers and creeks. The situation worsened as 1927 arrived. On New Year's Day, the Cumberland River near Nashville, Tennessee, overtopped its levees, demonstrating just how extreme the rainfall had become. Through the spring of 1927, a series of powerful storms repeatedly dumped extraordinary amounts of rain across the Mississippi drainage basin. In New Orleans alone, a single storm in March delivered nearly 15 inches of precipitation in just 18 hours. Saturated ground could no longer absorb water, and every additional downpour rushed unimpeded into the Mississippi River and its tributaries. By April, the river had grown into a monstrous, churning force, carrying at times more than twice the volume of water that flows over Niagara Falls. Despite the levees holding firm in many areas, the strain was immense. Along the riverbanks from Cairo, Illinois, down to the Gulf of Mexico, communities watched the rising water with mounting fear. The Mississippi was no longer a river confined to its channel. It had become an inland sea, teetering on the edge of catastrophe, and the people living along its banks were unaware of how close they were to disaster. The breaking point came in mid-April 1927 as the Mississippi River, swollen far beyond its natural channel, overwhelmed its artificial barriers. On April 16th, the first major levee south of Cairo, Illinois, gave way, instantly inundating more than 175,000 acres of farmland in Missouri. The breach unleashed torrents of water with such force that entire communities were submerged within hours, crops destroyed, and livestock swept away. The disaster accelerated on April 21st at Mounds Landing, Mississippi. There, a levee failed under the immense pressure of the river, opening a crevasse nearly 3/4 of a mile wide. The floodwaters surged with the force of a tidal wave, rushing across the landscape and creating temporary waterfalls as they poured into the delta. Some areas were submerged under 30 feet of water, with entire plantations, farms, and villages buried beneath the muddy expanse. To protect New Orleans, city and state officials made a controversial decision on April 29th. They intentionally dynamited the Poydras levee, sacrificing the smaller parishes of St. Bernard and Plaquemines to relieve pressure on levees protecting the city. This drastic measure highlights the desperate measures required to manage such a vast and unpredictable river system. For 153 days, the Mississippi remained above flood stage, leaving an inland sea that covered an area equivalent to the combined size of Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. The sheer scale of the floodwaters transformed familiar landscapes, roads vanished under muddy water, Rail lines were rendered useless, and farmland became unrecognizable. Communities that had relied on the river for transport and commerce were cut off, isolated in a vast, turbulent expanse of floodwater. The Mississippi River had escaped all human control, demonstrating the limits of the levee-only approach and foreshadowing the need for a radical rethink of flood management across the United States. The devastation of the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927 was not measured solely in acres of farmland or miles of destroyed levees. It was measured in lives uprooted and communities shattered. Between 600,000 and 700,000 people were displaced, making it one of the largest displacements in United States history at the time. Entire towns were submerged under floodwaters, forcing families to cling to rooftops, trees, and any high ground available for days. The official death toll ranged from 250 to 500, though historians believe the real number was likely far higher, particularly among African Americans whose deaths were often unrecorded. Racial inequality magnified the suffering. Black laborers, who made up the majority of the Delta's workforce, were forced at gunpoint to build and reinforce sandbag levees under brutal conditions, while white families were prioritized for evacuation and assistance. When the levees failed, African Americans were often left stranded on small patches of land, exposed to cold, hunger, and disease. Relief efforts were segregated. In the 154 refugee camps established by the Red Cross, Black refugees received fewer provisions and endured squalid conditions. Many were forced to work on cleanup efforts or levee repairs for local white authorities, effectively continuing a system of exploitation even in the aftermath of disaster. Women and children were given priority access to food, shelter, and medical care, leaving Black men and families with little protection or resources. This social catastrophe had long-term effects on the population. Many African Americans, disillusioned by their treatment during the flood and the blatant racial injustices, began to migrate northward in search of safety, work, and dignity. The flood accelerated the Great Migration, changing the demographic makeup of northern cities like Chicago, Detroit, and St. Louis, and reshaping the social and political landscape of the United States for decades to come. As the floodwaters slowly receded in late summer of 1927, the Mississippi Delta revealed a landscape unrecognizable from the one that had existed before. Entire fields of cotton were ruined, and homes and businesses were buried under silt, and transportation routes were obliterated. The economic impact was staggering, with losses estimated between $250 million and over $1 billion in 1927 currency, a sum that would equal billions today. Agriculture, the backbone of the region, was shattered for years, leaving many families destitute and without livelihoods. The political consequences were immediate and far-reaching. Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover was placed in charge of coordinating relief efforts, earning the nickname the Great Humanitarian for his organizational skill in delivering supplies and aid. However, his administration's delegation of Black refugees to local authorities resulted in widespread mistreatment and exploitation, drawing criticism and leaving deep scars on affected communities. These injustices fueled political realignment, as African Americans increasingly shifted support away from the Republican Party, setting the stage for long-term changes in American politics. The disaster also prompted a complete reevaluation of flood management policy. The Flood Control Act of 1928 was passed, authorizing the Army Corps of Engineers to implement the Mississippi River and Tributaries Project. This comprehensive system of levees, floodways, spillways, and reservoirs was designed to manage floods in collaboration with the river's natural flow, rather than attempting to confine it entirely. It was the largest public works project in American history at the time, forever altering the landscape and infrastructure of the Mississippi Valley. Beyond engineering and politics, the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927 reshaped American society. It accelerated the Great Migration, transformed urban demographics in northern cities, and exposed systemic inequalities in disaster response. The flood remains a powerful reminder that natural disasters are rarely purely natural. They are magnified by human decisions and social structures. While levees and floodways now stand as monuments to engineering progress, the lessons of 1927 endure, emphasizing the need for preparedness, equity, and respect for the immense power of nature. The Mississippi Flood of 1927 was more than a flood. It was a national crisis that revealed the strengths and failures of a nation, reshaped communities, and left an indelible mark on American history.